Welcome to episode 2 of the SoundBytes podcast. I'm your host, Nick Martin. Today we'll be speaking with Nick Good as part of the Garden Spot Fire Rescue staff that operates as a volunteer fire department in New Holland, Pennsylvania. Nick operates as the Director of Administration for the fire company. We'll be discussing the various nuances of operating a service such as a fire company and some of the even more special circumstances of operating a volunteer fire company. What makes this an especially interesting conversation is the discussion around how Garden Spot integrates technology into their services while incorporating the Mennonite and Amish community that make up a good portion of their volunteers. So how has technology played a role in a 100-plus-year-old company? Stick around to find out. All right, let's get started.
Sure.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining me here. Obviously, is very new. You're actually going to be my second guest, so look for that in a couple weeks. So
Okay.
that I'm going to publish it. I'll give you a sneak peek before we get too far along the way. But yeah, I appreciate having you here. So yeah, do you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself? It could be personal, professional, whatever you want it to be about.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Nick Good. I'm Director of Administration for Garden Spot Fire Rescue. I grew up in New Holland, lived there until I was 21, and then moved to Lancaster. Currently live in Lancaster City and drive back to New Holland every day. Always joke that I'd be somewhere involved in the New Holland community. Actually was a firefighter with Garden Spot before I came on board. I was a firefighter with them for about 4 or 5 years. Then learned I don't like fighting a fire. I can't go into a burning building. Don't put me on a ladder. Don't make me flip a car back over.
Yeah.
I'll do all the logistics. Just don't make me do that.
Sure. Oh, I totally get that because I don't even do that. So
No, I always joke. My brother had me start with a fire company. He's like, you should really get involved. You're going to love this. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. He's like, well, your application's already filled out. You're going to meet with them in 3 nights. Please show up.
So
Don't embarrass me.
You would not self-describe as a adrenaline junkie, perhaps.
Not in that way.
Not in that way, okay.
I will say I went skydiving, loved it.
Yeah.
But not the fire company adrenaline is its own beast. I respect all the guys that do that, and I love working with them, but
Sure.
just don't make me do it.
Well, then you're in a good position. You can help logistically, but you don't necessarily have to run into that building.
Right. So I can sit back and say, hey, look, that's really cool footage to watch, but
Yeah.
I didn't have to do it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. So how'd you end up in that role?
So actually, Daryl Kaiser, our fire chief, had reached out. His wife had reached out to me, actually, and said, hey, we're looking to expand this role. We want it to be full-time. We want a full-time person that has knowledge and grants and working with the community. We think you'd be a great role. You want to come interview? And so I went and said, yeah, I'll happily interview. I didn't know at the time, they didn't have a plan B yet.
You were it.
I was their plan because I asked them a few months later. I'm like, well, who was the other candidate? They're like, we didn't have another candidate. We were hoping you said yes. And I said, well, what happened if I said no? They said, well, you weren't going to say no. So yeah, they sought me out specifically because at the time I was working with recruitment and retention. I was getting involved in the administrative stuff. It wasn't anything too new. I knew the team. I knew how people thought and how they functioned. So it's not like bringing somebody completely new in off the streets and then they have to learn how to work with 150 different volunteers, all the different personalities. Because that's what makes the job the most unique is that I work by myself in an office most of the day, but there's 150 people that can come to me with a problem, and I know how pretty much all of them think and function.
Yeah. I mean, especially the uniqueness of being a volunteer fire company. A fire company, I feel like, is already its own unique culture in itself in the sense of, like, there's a brotherhood, there's a bond there. I mean, you guys are, again, running into burning buildings are working in probably the worst conditions of like a car accident or some major disaster. So, like, understanding the inner workings probably was super beneficial to you.
Right. Yeah. Again, the idea that everybody's doing this because they want to, they don't have to.
Sure.
I mean, anybody can become a volunteer firefighter, but there's a mindset and there's a willingness to do it that has to be there to actually get involved. I mean, I like to think I had the servant's heart to to do this. I just didn't have that will on the other side on the adrenaline. But yeah, it's a very unique environment. There's nothing like it. Having worked with Pennsylvania Senate and worked with all these different organizations in previous jobs, there is nothing like working with volunteers. A whole different ball field than working with people that get paid to do it.
Yeah, sure. You're probably exactly right. And really, the only people getting paid to, I mean, you're in a paid position because it's a full-time job in itself, but like paid firefighting is really only available perhaps, but what, for the bigger, more condensed population areas? Right.
So like around here, really the only paid departments that we think about are places like Manheim Township, your Lancaster City, you start getting into Reading, down towards Philly, in Chester County, you get into more paid, but around here it's all volunteer. Everybody still is a volunteer. Lancaster County is pretty much the example of what a volunteer community should look like. Recently, the state had said about how important the volunteer fire company is, and if you want an example, to look into Lancaster County.
Oh, that's cool.
Just because of how all these small volunteer fire companies were able to survive, especially during COVID.
Yeah.
When funding stopped, people stopped, and we're asking even more at that point, because obviously with health issues, we're asking the guys to do even more than they did before, and all those guys stepped up and they said, "Yeah, let's do it."
So that didn't scare them off.
No,
they were all in.
Obviously there was the protocols that we had to follow and the rules that we had to change, but nobody really batted an eye to say, "I don't want to do this anymore."
That's awesome.
Maybe one or two, but out of 150,
that's not. Yeah,
it was expected.
Well, that's a good point too. I mean, in a lot of ways, I guess it should be expected they wouldn't have batted an eye just because of the nature of what they're volunteering for. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it wasn't something we thought about ahead of time, but as it started rolling through, we weren't surprised at all.
Wow, that's really neat. So like, wow, that was a fun bunny trail. So your day-to-day activities, like what I think you listed off a couple to begin with, but like what do you typically do in a day's or a week's time?
So we'll go with the general week. It's anything from dealing with personnel issues, getting out in the community, talking to businesses, figuring out how they can partner with a fire company, working on grants to find what opportunities are out there for funding. Obviously, with the fire company, we're always looking for any funding opportunities. Some of it comes back into just the general public's questions, like what does the fire company do? What can they help us with? So there's never a dumb question. People can come in to ask whatever they want, and if I have an answer, I'm going to provide it. Beyond that, it's making sure that all of the emergency reporting systems are functioning, that we're getting everything back to the state that needs to be reported. Anything that needs to happen off the fire scene is typically on but that can change from day to day.
Sure.
Each day is a very unique day. And
that probably makes it interesting then.
Right. It's not a mundane 9 to 5. I mean, one of the key things with my job is being the public information officer. So being able to answer the public's questions, whether it's non-emergency, on the fire scene, whatever that is, that can be at 2:00 in the morning. It can be 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So it keeps me active and on my toes.
No doubt, especially at that time of night. So talked about the state a little bit. Do you guys receive state funding then? I mean, if you're reporting to the state, like, is there like a mutual beneficial relationship there? Like, what kind of stuff are you reporting to the state, and how does the state help you guys out?
So the state, to keep record of all of the calls that come through, what's happening, more so on the legal standpoint, we have to submit a call report. So it has the personnel, the equipment used, what times things were dispatched, when they came back, what did they do, any equipment that we used, whether it's, stay dry for a vehicle accident, we have to report that.
Oh, wow.
So it's going back through and making sure that all of that's completed for them, because then that makes us eligible for any of the grants and funding that the state has.
That's cool.
So that, let's say our department reports all 490 calls for the year, it gives us the leverage that if the other department only reports 10 of their 200 calls, they're not getting the same opportunities, and making sure that departments are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense then.
So it's that mutual balance that, we want the $50,000 that they're offering, but to do that, we need to be doing our job and making sure that we're doing.
And showing proof that, hey, if we're going to spend that $50,000, you're going to use that $50,000 wisely.
Right. Yeah, they want to see that a department that's running 400 plus calls is getting it versus somebody who might roll one engine out every other week.
Sure. And so is that about how many calls you're doing in a year's time? 400 some?
We just hit 500 last year, so that was our biggest number.
Okay.
That's only going to continue to go up.
And why is that? Just the nature of life?
More so because the community's growing and because there's more people, there's more buildings, there's more potential for fault.
Yeah, I see that.
So if you have the fault, a vehicle accident, a building tripping an alarm, any of that stuff, it all gets checked off as one of the calls.
Okay. Well, I guess, there's a natural tendency, I guess, as a community grows, so the tendency to probably have an accident grows with it.
Right. And we always joke, we don't want accidents to happen.
Yeah.
But we want to be there so when that does happen,
That makes
we're prepared.
Sense. That's right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Our community has been growing these past couple of years. I mean, it does feel like a very different, there's just more people.
Right.
And new cul-de-sacs and developments going up. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So thinking of your Garden Spot Fire Rescues services, I think I know what its niche is. It's firefighting.
It's firefighting. It's fire services.
But like what is something that people may find unique about the services you guys offer?
I think what most people don't know is there's a lot of stuff we do beyond just showing up to a burning house or a car accident. I mean, we like to pride ourselves on providing, we have water rescue teams, we have search and rescue teams, we have teams certified in rope rescue.
Oh, wow. For those big mountains we got to climb.
So, I mean, like we have a response team for places like Chickies Rock.
Oh.
So our teams are certified to rappel down off the rocks there.
Okay.
So we have teams certified for that. But even beyond all the really cool, what I think is a really cool services that we provide, I mean, it's as simple as we do inspections for businesses. If they need a basic fire inspection, we provide fire extinguishers, fire extinguisher training, smoke detectors. We'll pretty much do anything that somebody needs.
Sure.
As long as it's within reason.
Yeah.
I always like to say on the niche side of things is that if you can think of something, somebody on our team is probably able to help you with. So never be afraid to call us outside of the emergency scenario, solely because one of us can help.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
And we're here to help. So if you think that you need something, if we can't fix it, or don't know what the solution is, we'll find somebody that does.
What an interesting, service market that you guys would have then. I mean, like providing any type of service far beyond just your typical big emergencies that probably everybody thinks about, like fires and car accidents. That's really neat. Really neat.
And that's what we try to push is that, I mean, we joke, but it does happen. We will rescue a cat out of a tree. I know it sounds stereotypical, but we have done it. But that's what we're there for.
Yeah.
We're there to, if there's a problem, we want to fix it.
Wow, that is really cool. And you guys are also engaged too in a lot of different opportunities. I think you guys for, I don't know how many years it's been now, have done like craft shows or different events, blood drives. I know you guys have done in the past. I mean, you guys are.
Yeah, we now do a monthly blood drive with Central PA Blood Bank. Okay. So we'd started that during COVID when they couldn't find a location. And so we said, go ahead, use our facility.
That's awesome.
Any way that we can partner with the community, we're going to try.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I mean, again, if you can think of it, we're going to try to make it work for you.
That is so cool. No, I mean, that is unbelievably helpful because I feel like, this is something we could take for granted as a community, but that probably not every community is getting this type of level of care or service in this area.
I'd be a little biased, but yeah, most communities don't have the network. They don't have the community's backing to do that. They think of the fire service, they think of running fire calls, and that's it. We've been blessed that we have local businesses, local community partners that are willing to step up to help us so that we can give back more.
Awesome. Wow, yeah, you guys are, that's awesome. Even some of this I'm learning for the first time, so that's really neat. I appreciate that. Okay, so obviously it's technology podcast, so like I'm sure things have changed drastically in the past 10 years in terms of technology somewhere along the way. Absolutely.
A simple one to shift from is the idea of having a physical map in all the apparatus to using an iPad. So every piece of apparatus, so every vehicle we have has a tablet in it. That tablet alone is the lifeline for the officer. So they can pull up, obviously they're running maps, they can pull up all the pre-plans so they can see what the building's layout is before they even get there. They can see all the notes from the county on what's happening. If things are changing in the 5 minutes they're driving, they can pull up, it's as simple as pulling up an aerial shot of what the property looks like so they can stage the apparatus where they needed to be.
Yeah.
10 years ago, we would have been looking at a physical map and hoping that this hasn't changed, that there's not a new driveway.
Yeah.
And that was the big thing, was that they would sometimes show up to, the firefighter centers would show up to an incident and there might be a new driveway in there that we had no idea was there. So now we're trying to find new maps to match that, or they're hand sketching it in. And I love that they're trying to do that, but it's not even remotely close to what it should look like.
Sure.
But just the idea that we can have everything at our fingertips the minute we leave station.
That's awesome. And who submits these you use the word pre-plans. I'm used to it because I worked with you guys for a little bit.
Right.
But what are pre-plans and how do you get them?
So a pre-plan's what we request from a business that lays out where a gas line hookup might be. It's how your electrical system's set up. It's the general floor map of your building and the blueprint. And it's just giving us an idea of when we're walking into the building, we can see where the key parts are that we need. So if we need to take the power out of a building, we know where that's at. If you're storing some type of hazardous material, we know where that's at and we know what it is, so that we're not surprised. We don't have a firefighter walking in and saying, oh, there's a giant tank of CO2.
Sure.
That could be explosive.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Big problem.
So it's making sure that we know that ahead of time. So that's one of the things we have to rely on the community to provide that information to us, so that in the case of something happens, we can do that.
Right.
But that's all based off of, we use Dropbox.
Oh, okay.
So it's all cloud-based storage. So somebody sends it into me, I scan it into the system, put it into Dropbox.
Even when they're out on the road, I mean, even if things change, like you said on the drive there, I mean, it's instantaneous then.
Yeah, they can change stuff on the scene. It's not waiting until getting back.
Oh, wow.
They can go in and edit the documents however they need to do. The idea that we could do this 10 years ago, I mean, personally, I would have just laughed at it and said, yeah, okay, sure.
Nice dream, right?
Yeah, like that's a pipeline dream, but it's not. It's reality. That makes me think about, in 10 years, what are we going to be at then?
Do you have any predictions? Do you see anything coming down the pipeline? You're like, hey, this is a potential.
I think the ability to streamline the material from the different iPads and just the interconnectivity between whether it's an iPad, a tablet, whatever you want to use, between that, cell phones, anything. I think just the interactive abilities that we're going to have, personally, I think are going to blow my mind on how easy it'll be to integrate everything together. Because even in the last 2 years that almost 3 years that I've been involved, we've been able to integrate even more stuff. And that's such a short period of time.
Yeah.
So in 10 years, I can't imagine.
It's almost difficult to say.
Right,
because we haven't thought of it yet.
We haven't thought of it, and things are moving just so fast on the technology end of what we can do. And some of it comes down to, it's just things we haven't even tried yet. So it's out there, but we haven't tried it yet. We're in the process right now of switching our emergency reporting system to be an all-inclusive system. So it's where we track training hours, we track the incidents we're responding to, we're tracking personnel files. So we're moving away from the typical, manila folder that has everybody's information. So it's all in one cloud-based system. So if something were to happen in our building, anybody can access this. More people have access to the information instantaneously. And it makes responding to requests for training classes so much easier.
Yeah.
Than going through a paper file, trying to find out what class have you taken, what haven't you taken, can you take this class? Just little things like that, again, a few years ago, nobody thought was possible, and it is.
Yeah.
Because technology allows us to do that.
That is so cool. I mean, some of the things we're talking about, you talk about pipe dreams. Microsoft recently released, I say recently, it's probably been a couple years now, like this whole idea of like a virtual reality with the lenses.
Right.
And it made me think, because they're doing it for military, it made me think, is that even a possibility for firefighting or for police officers down the road? Like, to have building schematics through like these lenses. I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but yet 10 years ago, a lot of this sounded like science fiction.
Personally, I think in 10 years, you could see that. I think less. More so because the county's moving towards an initiative for more virtual reality-based training.
Oh, wow.
More so on the police side.
Okay.
For de-escalation training. I know that they just recently received a grant for about $500,000 to do that from the state.
Wow.
But if they can do that on the police end...
Why not?
It's not that far from doing on the fire end to go through some of the scenarios. Now, I'm a firm believer that there's nothing like the real thing to train you.
Sure, yeah.
But at the same time, before you get to that, if somebody can't handle the virtual reality, they'll never handle the physical part of it. So it gives a much better taste as to what people can actually handle. And I think that's key because there's a lot of stress, obviously, that goes into this job.
No doubt.
So there's a lot of technology that's out there that we've recently been discussing of how do we help to manage the stress. And that's the other things people don't think about is that it's not just doing the firefighting piece of it. It's also helping managing people and how do people respond to things. So I know one of the initiatives that we'd like to do is pursue some of the technology on the mental health side of helping our guys deal with different scenarios. How do they handle it? Training and logistics opportunities that they can tap into so that they're always feeling comfortable with the job they're performing before they even have to do it.
Yeah. Interesting. So even mental health, the whole idea, I certainly believe it, that they're going to have some stuff they run across or things happen to them dealing with mental health. Does technology play a role in that? I mean, you talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think it will more as we move forward. The advancement of science on understanding mental health, getting information out to people, and how easy it is to address some of that has made it easier to figure out, okay, we know these issues, how can technology play a role? And with firefighters being a prime example of people that will endure PTSD, there's a lot of programs that are being designed out there that use technology so it's more accessible. So you're not having to go to see a counselor in person.
Yeah.
So something as simple as your video conferencing, your FaceTime has made it easier for getting firefighters connected to the help they need.
Oh, that's
so it's using the technology that's out there too in different ways. So obviously we might use something like FaceTime to meet, to talk anything business, but it's also great for our firefighters to get connected to the counseling help that might be needed. But nobody ever really stops to think about that until it's too late. So I think part of it's just trying to be proactive on our end, but it's out there. The technology is out there. We just have to use it.
Okay. Well, no, it makes sense. I mean, you hear about it every day. A quick question actually just came across my mind is Garden Spot Fire Rescue, probably along with many, many other fire companies within Lancaster County, is a plainer community filled with Amish. Do you have a bunch, either Amish or Mennonites, run across with the fire company, Garden Spot Fire Rescue?
We probably have about a third of our department is based in the plain community in some way. That's made for an interesting challenge along the way.
With technology, especially.
With technology, obviously, because there's that barrier that just naturally exists. And that's something we address because obviously we're not going to infringe on any personal beliefs on how they want to do stuff. But it makes us get creative in how do we integrate the technology that it's not offending a culture, it's not offending their lifestyle, their personal choices, but still allowing them to use it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a tightrope to walk on.
It is. We have some of the plain community does not want to use a cell phone. One of the key technologies we've switched to, instead of carrying the big pager, we've switched to all text-based systems. So the county has a text-based system that sends out a notification when a call comes through, and then we use a program called I Am Responding that notifies people of the incident, and then it's sent into the station as well and has a running list of who's responding to what station, what the incident is, where it's at. So we've learned how to integrate some of that technology into the technology they're using. Tricky.
Yeah.
It depends on whether they're willing to use a cell phone. If they're willing to use a cell phone, we still invest in a pager.
That's a foreign thought to many people.
Correct.
Using a cell phone.
Well, I mean, part of that also comes into having a demographic of some of the older generation that's involved with figuring out how do you get a flip phone to integrate with an app-based software. So we found workarounds for that so that we use multiple different types of technology so that everybody's getting notified somehow. Some of them might still use a traditional pager. Some of them might solely just use their cell phone. Some people have turned the pager in and have moved on, which again, 10 years ago was a foreign thought.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Every firefighter carried a pager.
That's right. Pretty normal sound. You go to a restaurant, you hear a call come through and see a couple of guys hop up.
Right. That's one of those things that's starting to change because there again, technology's evolved that now it goes off same sound on their phone. They pull their phone out, look, they can see where the call's at, who's responding. So in the case, if one station needs more people, somebody can see that before they even leave.
Yeah.
So if they need to respond to a different station to help get a crew, they can do that.
That's really neat.
And again, 10 years ago, we never would have thought that's possible. You just show up to your station and if they don't need you, they...
Yeah, so the call used to go out. People either came or they didn't.
Right.
You didn't really know what was what.
Right. You just showed up and you'd listen on your way there to what piece was going to go out. You may get there and find out there's nothing coming out of this station. I don't need to go.
Okay.
But you wouldn't know that till you got there. But now people can see that ahead of time. That again, it's helping to streamline so that, especially like now with prices being high, people can help to limit how much they're driving. They can help to limit and manage some of the stressors that are already out there.
Sure. And it probably helps your volunteers to feel better about themselves, like in the sense of they're not wasting their time. They're not waiting until they bike, walk, drive, whatever they're doing to get there and then find out, oh, okay, don't need you. That's probably helping.
Yes, it's very helpful. It's helpful for, and you just said it, the people that bike, they use a scooter, whatever it is, especially on the plane community side, that they're not leaving their job, taking 5 minutes to pedal as fast as they can to get there to find out, oh, I didn't need to be here.
Yeah. That's right. And so I feel like the talk of every town across America is staffing issues.
Yes.
What's that like for volunteers, especially a volunteer fire company?
It's a struggle. So there's a mix between mentalities on departments on, do we need to staff, do we not need to staff? For us, we have enough volunteers day and night that we don't have to staff yet.
Okay.
I think we will get to that point. And when we get to that point, it'll be using stuff, emergency reporting. I am responding to one, track who's staffing, how long are they staffing, what kind of things are they getting done at the station while they're there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is a lot better than what had been there when I started, which was a clipboard and a checklist. Because I'll be honest, I didn't remember to go check the clipboard. They might have 30 forms filled out, and I wouldn't think about that. But when it pops right up on my cell phone, on my laptop of what was done,
Cleans up that whole process.
it cleans it up. Nobody has to worry about if they forgot to turn a form. And I think going back to the staffing idea, absolutely, I think at some point, sooner than later, we're going to be faced with that.
Okay.
Just with how culture's changing, how demographics are changing. People work from home. People don't work the traditional 9 to 5 as much as they used to.
That's true.
So it makes it interesting on who's responding and when. One of the big things that we faced was the changing of the family dynamic with both the mom and dad working, which was a big change from the 70s of typically the men would go to run the fire call, a mother would stay home. But with that demographic changing, that opened up all sorts of different challenges. And there again, I think using technology to meet people where they're at is key.
Yeah, you have to.
And I think that's where a lot of times, especially on fire departments, people aren't taking advantage of the technology that's already out there. So they miss the mark, but it's right there. It's always been right there.
So where do you keep informed of all that kind of stuff?
There's a mix. Honestly, a lot of the firefighting magazines that have switched to online is where I find some of this information. So somebody like New York City might already be doing this at a massive level.
They got money.
Right. They have money. They have a much larger scale. So we start looking at that if they're using this for 200 firefighters, how can we use this at a smaller scale? And how can we use this at a volunteer scale where people aren't at the station and people have a much different personality than a paid firefighter? So I think part of that's being proactive. I mean, there again, technology is at our fingertips 24/7. So it's hopping online and reading through some of the research that's being done. It's reading through the magazines, looking at what other departments are doing. I mean, Facebook can be a wonderful thing for that in the fact that we can see what other departments are doing and seeing what's working and what's not working. We recently were approached about the emergency reporting software we use. If somebody said, is it worthwhile? And we said, yes, there's a cost to it, but you have to weigh how much money are you willing to save to cut so many corners anymore.
That's a good point.
So some of it comes down to just being able to reach out and talk to people, see what's out there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, really what you're talking about too is a peer group. You're communicating with your different departments across the county or probably even broader, statewide even at times. Right. And you're able to communicate back and forth what's working, what's not working. That's awesome.
And I think that's the key thing is communication alone is a powerful tool. And there's tools to help us communicate even more effectively than we ever thought. So that's usually, like if a fire company comes to me and asks, what's the key thing you need? Communication. You need to be able to communicate with your own team, have ways to communicate with the people around you. So your mutual aid, so your neighboring departments, your neighboring EMS, police, whoever it is. And then being able to connect on a national or global scale. Because there might be something that somebody's doing in, let's say, Nebraska, California, Washington State. We're never going to physically see it.
Right.
But if you're staying on top of the technology and all these communication channels, you will find out about it. And then you can integrate it into what you're doing.
Which only helps your local community.
Right.
Everything you're talking about really is just benefiting us locally. I mean, it's benefiting many, many, many communities. Specifically, as you guys integrate it, it's benefiting us. Everything you guys do to create a better culture, a better service atmosphere really only benefits the community and helps us.
Absolutely. I mean, that's our focus is we're trying to make this as easy for our members as possible. We're trying to make it as efficient for the community as possible because when we're responding, they're in some type of turmoil. Something bad has happened. And we don't want them waiting longer. We don't want there to be any type of glitch or problem along the way. And to be honest, the only way that we've been able to make that more efficient is technology, is the use of technology and finding out how can technology make this even better than what we had. We joke we have our original fire truck, which is our 1918 American LaFrance. And if you step into our museum to take a look at that and then compare it to our brand new engines that we bought last year, the first thing you'll notice is the amount of technology that is integrated in.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, as simple as a backup camera. On how much easier it is to navigate a tight street.
Oh, especially those big things.
When you're driving such a large piece of apparatus and you have to get down a narrow alley, there's so much technology now that allows you that you don't even have to think twice. It's going to protect you the whole way through. The same with being able to flow water. If you talk about 1918, you're talking about maybe a 100-gallon tank of water that's flowing at a very low rate. Technology has allowed us to have 1,500 gallons that we can pump out in minutes.
Wow, that's incredible.
And that's all technology that people like Seagrave and Pierce have designed to make it easier to put water on fire and to respond to a vehicle accident. The hand tools that we're using, again, it's all this technology. Yeah. I don't think people, to be honest, stop to think about how far we've come.
Wow, that is a very profound point.
Because our firefighters see the next new hand tool.
That changes in 6 months.
Right. And it's constantly changing. So we're trying to stay on top of that. But I don't think there's always an appreciation for how far we've come. Because if we can appreciate that, it helps keep us humble as we're looking, how do we grow more? And what kind of tools, what kind of technology can we use to grow as much as we did from 1970 to 2020, as we will from 2020 to 2050, 2070?
So if you're saying if people want to grasp appreciation for technology and how far we've come, they should stop by your station and visit the museum and then maybe get a little tour of something that you currently have.
Oh yeah, we're always happy to have people come through and take a tour. That's a great opportunity to physically show how drastically fire departments have grown, what has to have evolved, and how technology specifically has played a role in growing. Wow. Because there again, you don't really stop to think about that. But when you can see the difference between a truck that doesn't even have a cab on it to now we have seats that have our air units built into them that a guy can strap right into all of his gear.
Yeah, it's right there.
In seconds.
Yeah.
Again, in 1918, they were just happy that they had a helmet.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That is so hard. To have the ability of hindsight is always 20/20, but I feel like oftentimes what we're not paying attention to is that we can see the old stuff if it's well preserved. Like you guys have well preserved your history.
Oh, yes.
And so you guys can actually look back and say, hey, wow, man, look how we've advanced and look how much work was put into this to make it what it is today. I mean, it's hard to appreciate it when you don't see it or take time to see it.
Right. And I think, one, it's that a lot of it's just been lost over time. Wear and tear to equipment damages it. And two, it's just taking the 5 minutes to see that difference.
That's a good point. Well, I don't want to skip over anything. Did you have anything else that you thought would be interesting? Fire company or technology or whatever?
I don't. I think, again, it's just coming down to appreciating the technology. Always taking the time to see what else is out there. I think that's, again, another key place where people miss the mark is that if you're not looking at what's out there, you're not learning, you're not growing. And a firefighter is never done learning. They're never done growing. I mean, we have firefighters that have been training for 30, 40 years, and they still continue to train. And again, that all comes down to technology's changing, demographics are changing. If you want to be part of the change, you have to grow with it. And a lot of that comes down to embrace the new technology.
That's a good word to finish out on. And one final thing I'll ask before I let you off the hook is, if people want to learn more about GardenSpot, how can they do that?
There's a couple different ways. I mean, if you're local or if you're not local and you're willing to travel, always stop by the station. There's usually somebody there that's willing to give a tour. Guys love to show off the fire trucks. Any opportunity they can have, they'll do that. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So if you're on social media, you can track us down that way. Okay. You can hop on our website, which is gsfr39.net, and that'll get you contact information for if you want to give us a call, shoot us an email. Any way you want to get in touch with us, we're always happy. Perfect. And if you want to schedule a time to come see something, we're always happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, hey, I'm sure to post all the contact information that you just described in the description so people have an easy way to find it. But yeah, appreciate your time. And
absolutely.
You know, if we have to do this again in a couple of years and figure out how things have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. Have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, great. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
I want to thank Nick for coming to speak on SoundBytes. Nick has been an integral part of GardenSpot for years, and that felt obvious during our time together. If you would like to learn more about GardenSpot Fire Rescue or connect with Nick, I'll make sure there's contact information in the description of this episode that you can use. If you have any questions or comments about the content we create, please feel free to reach out to us via our contact information in the episode's description. Thank you for listening to SoundBytes. We'll catch you next time.